Guys, let's talk about Rotten Tomatoes, and why not? Because a lot of us have realized over the years that there might be a little something rotten about Rotten Tomatoes. You know, I know you guys have seen it. It seems like there's this consistent thing that goes on where when a new movie comes out, more times than not, you're going to see a divide between the Rotten Tomatoes critics and the audience, the administration and the people. Go figure. Okay, so I want to talk about this, guys, because it turns out that Rotten Tomatoes just might have a system of rating these movies that can be seen as biased or racist, maybe. And we're going to talk about this, guys. This is the Gospel According to Mark with a C. He is I and I am he. Just taking some time to tell you exactly what's on my mind. Now, guys, before I spin off into this, I want to give a big old shout out to my good buddy, Steve Kenobi. If you're in this circle of YouTube, you know Steve Kenobi, the man with the ridiculous wit, intelligent man, brutal man in his commentary of what's going on out here. And he made me aware of this, guys. So I want to talk about this. Big shout out to Steve Kenobi. All right. So listen, let me just tell you what tipped me off to Rotten Tomatoes, because everything was smooth sailing for a long time. I trusted the critics, you know. I mean, I've always had it in my mind that I can judge these things for myself, but I did look to them for a little bit of guidance, right? But I think what fucked it up for me was The Last Jedi. Okay, The Last Jedi. It was impossible not to get caught up in the hype of The Last Jedi. We were going by the fact that as of the end of The Force Awakens, you saw Luke Skywalker. So everybody was happy about seeing Luke Skywalker in the next installment of the Star Wars so-called trilogy. But what ended up happening was we also got, if you're like me, you also got caught up in the hype that was created by the critics at that time. They made it seem like this was not just the best Star Wars movie ever, but it was probably the best movie ever, you know? So you heard all of the critics just like going off over this thing, and I couldn't help but get excited about it. I was like, oh my God, you know? Plus the trailer looked great, and you know, so you saw that. When you found out the reality of The Last Jedi, and I was like, this fucking shit, you know what I mean? The question came up to me. Well, why did the critics go off on it like that? Why did they just love it? And you saw nothing negative about The Last Jedi at all. And there was so many negative things to see, so many plot holes. Look, whether you like the movie or not is irrelevant. But the fact of the matter is that no piece of art, whether it's TV, movie, music, is above being criticized, okay? You know, that means positive and negative, but that's not what we saw. We saw overwhelmingly positive, glowing reviews, rave reviews about this movie that a sizable portion of the audience had a problem with. Now, of course, they tried to act like it was just the vocal minority. And then they tried to act like it was just the far right. It was just Trump supporters, which is very interesting. And I'm going to bring that point up later. It was Trump supporters. It was the far right. And if you were a black critic of The Last Jedi, to this day, you have not been addressed. You do realize that, right, guys? It's like if you're a black critic of The Last Jedi, if you're anything other than a white male, they have no answer for us at all. This is the reason why I consider the Dark Council to be one of the most important, most powerful voices out there, because we exist in defiance to these things. We exist in defiance of the ignoring of the black fan, you know, or the fan of any other diverse background. You know what I'm saying? So we're out here to let you know that we can speak for ourselves, because what these critics tend to do is, and you know, all of these shills, they try to act like they speak for us. All of this diversity is for those people. They love it. Nah, not all the time we don't. Not when it's not well done. Even John Boyega had a problem with it, you know, and a host of others, you know, of diverse backgrounds, you know, black, women, sexuality, gender. You know, it doesn't always go the way that they try to act like it's going. And that's the reason why we're here to speak that. But anyway, nonetheless, it turns out that Netflix, well, they'll probably do too, but it turns out that Rotten Tomatoes has a top critic advisory committee where they handpick their critics, and they pretty much, I guess, what can I say? They can control the way that a movie is reviewed based upon those critics that they choose because those critics that they choose have their own interests that they bring to the table. You know what I'm saying? So let's just read a little bit about what's going on so you can understand better what I'm saying. You can actually find this on Rotten Tomatoes' own website, okay? So it starts off by saying that we established the top critic designation back in 2008 as a way to recognize tomato meter approved critics who excel and are deeply committed to the craft of film criticism, as well as to offer users another layer of info to help them choose what to watch. The designation also factors into our Certified Fresh program. No film or TV season can reach that status unless there are 5 reviews from it from top critics. It goes on to say, also new is our Top Critics Advisory Committee, which works closely with the Rotten Tomatoes team to evaluate candidates. The board is made up of several critics and industry professionals of diverse backgrounds and prominence, and they will meet regularly to consider potential top critics, which will be designated on a rolling basis. Now, how did the new criteria impact the makeup of our top critics? With the launch of the revamp, we're adding 170 new individually approved top critics. Among the new top critics, 60% are women. Okay, so they're, the new top critics, 60%, the majority of them are women. An estimated 25% are people of color, and 24% published via video and podcasts. At Rotten Tomatoes, we're committed to building an inclusive critics community that reflects not just the current media landscape, but the global entertainment audience. Modernizing our top critics selection process is a big part of that and continues the work we did in revamping our overall critics criteria in 2018, which introduced more fresh voices and platforms into the pool of opinion that makes up our tomato meter scores. You can read about those changes here, and then they put a link going somewhere. Okay, whatever. Now, a richer and more diverse set of reviewers will be showcased as top critics, spotlighted at the top of our movie and TV pages and playing their part in Certified Fresh designations. If you see that little red star next to one of their names, go on and check out their work. We think you'll like it! Okay, all of that sounds well and good, right? Until I start looking at just a few. Okay, I'm sure there's many more, but just a few of their top critics advisory committee voices, okay? So let's start with Monica Castillo. Okay, she's an arts and culture reporter. So Monica Castillo on Twitter, she said, this is March 15, 2021, to the people making fun of the term bamboo ceiling, I beg you to do some reading. A lot of white critics out there don't seem to read people of color or POC writers, and it's showing. Okay, so she's taking these white critics to task. All right, then you have some guy named David Fear, who's a senior editor, film, TV critic of Rolling Stone. According to this source, he's suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. He likes to spend his time on Twitter targeting a specific ethnicity and gender. The white male, of course, who else? Then expects readers to digest his views on cultural relevancy with a straight face. Okay, now the good one, this is where it gets juicy, guys. This is the good one. Jessica Kiang. All right, she's a film critic for Variety, The Playlist, the Sight and Sound magazine. Okay, so she writes on Twitter, let's see, women and people of color and other underrepresented minorities don't have to create better art than Citizen Kane or Ulysses to justify their seat at the table. They just have to be better than the worst of the white men who are currently occupying those positions. And that, my friends, is a fucking low bar. So there she is taking her shot at white filmmakers of today. All right. Now, I mean, you're just doing this all across the board. Like, that to me is the definition of racism right there. When you're just judging a person by the color of their skin and saying that you want no more of that. You have no value for that anymore. All right. So in order to lift yourself up, you got to shit on other people. That's just wrong. But this is what you will find on Rotten Tomatoes Top Critics Advisory Committee. Let's move on. This is Amy Nicholson. She's saying from the 60s on, politicians studied how to turn themselves into movie stars, and movie stars figured out how to turn themselves into politicians, creating one macho white male image of leadership that we're still trying to undo. All right, so Amy Nicholson has an axe to grind, and like I said, these people can feel how they want to feel. My problem is that they happen to sit on a board where you can accept or deny someone for employment. You know, you can accept or deny someone for a position of influence. Now, is it a coincidence that when you see the rise of attitudes like this, that you see a lowering in the quality of the films that we watch, and you see a widening divide between those critics that they pick and the actual paying audience? Now that tells me that your top critic advisory committee is full of shit, and they're irrelevant, and they're out of touch. Because when you see the critics on one side the way that you do on Rotten Tomatoes consistently, and you see the audience and you see that divide and that separation, you realize there's an issue, there's a problem. And this is the thing that I've been thinking about for a long time. Why the fuck does there continue to be this widening divide between the critics and the audience? And now I understand why that is. Because they put these fucking nut jobs in there who are, they're obsessed. They're so far up in the ass of white people that they can barely function and do the job that they've been hired to do, which is tell what is or what isn't quality filmmaking. You're putting yourself in a position where you're supposed to be a trusted voice, but you're betraying everything because you can't get over your own bias. You can't get over your own racism. Yes, racism. I'm tired of people saying, well, black people can't be racist, minorities can't be racist. The mere definition of racism is that you are in a position to deny somebody their pursuit of happiness, their ability to be able to make money. And that's what these people are doing. Hence, they are guilty of racism. All right. The only reason why people won't realize that is because they have this idea stuck in their heads that black people are weak, minorities are weak, and they're victims. And that, my friends, is also racism. Okay, because you have no expectations of these people to be able to actually empower themselves. So they need a hand up from people who believe that they are less than. That's what's going on here. So that's the problem with Rotten Tomatoes. All right. So when I realized that, when I look back on The Last Jedi and I see the way that they ran through the fandom and they accused them of being Trump supporters and alt-right and, you know, and radicalized and all of this stuff. Now I realize why that is, because you have these psychos over here who are obsessed with stomping out white people. You know what I'm saying? Why would I talk about this? You would think as a black man, you should shut up and you should enjoy the ride. Shut the fuck up. I am a man who likes to compete. Okay? I'm a man who likes to believe that my doing my best will be rewarded. I don't need to be treated like some fucking, like I'm in the Special Olympics and shit. You know what I'm saying? I don't like to be given a head start. All I like to know is that we are on equal footing. That's what I want for me. That's what I want for my son. That's what I want for everybody that I respect. Just don't stomp people out. I don't care who those people are. Because as they say, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. People who think like this should not be rewarded with continued employment in positions where you can affect somebody else's ability to be able to thrive and to live and to prosper. Okay, but there you have it. On Rotten Tomatoes, their top critic advisory committee it's, you know what it reminds me of? What was that chick's name? Christina Ariel or whatever her name was, you know, so obsessed with sticking it to white people that you fuck up your own credibility. Meanwhile, you're deep in the industry. You know what I mean? You've kissed more white ass than anybody, but they pay you. Those very same people, they pay you to drive people apart. And this is the world that we live in today. We have to get hip to people like this. We have to oppose them because those are the people who are tearing us apart in this world. They're the ones that's fucking it up for our kids. You know, it's so much larger than just entertainment. It's an attitude, and the attitude is dangerous. All right, guys. So that's all I have to say about this. Let me know how you feel about this. Get in the comment section. As always, you can like, you can share, you can subscribe. Guys, please do. You know, you have my permission. All right, you can catch me on Twitter. If not, I will see you on the next one. Thank you for listening. This is The Gospel According to Mark with a C. Rock on.